This episode of the All About Pigeons podcast is brought to you by the National Birmingham Roller Club. The NBRC is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting the flying and breeding of the Birmingham roller pigeons, a unique performance breed known for its acrobatic rolling flight. The club brings together fanciers from across the United States and around the world to share knowledge, grow the hobby, and celebrate these amazing birds. Each year, the NBRC hosts regional and national flying competitions, including the National Championship Fly, where members compete to showcase their best performing kit of rollers. Whether you're already raising Birmingham rollers or just fascinated by their aerial skills, the NBRC offers membership, bulletins, community, and resources to help you connect and learn more. Visit nbrc.us to join or find out how to get involved. Welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast, brought to you by the All About Pigeons nonprofit organization, which is dedicated to promoting education and promotion of the pigeon hobby. Every week, a listener requests to drive our conversations about all things pigeons. Join me, Philip Fry, as we learn and share stories about these incredible birds in this ancient hobby. Today we have with us Gene Giegoldt. He is the band secretary and pedigree historian for the National Birmingham Roller Club. We're going to learn all about the pedigree historian role and the band secretary role and Gene's long history with roller pigeons. So, Gene, thanks so much for coming on and talking with us.
That's my pleasure. Thank you.
We were talking a little bit before the recording here. You've obviously got a long background with pigeons. Can you talk about that and how that all started off?
Yeah, it's a family thing. My father and my grandfather had pigeons, and I just grew up with them. But my grandfather in particular had just barn pigeons and had 10 kids back in the 30s and 40s. So that was a method of feeding them, I think, but he won't admit to it. So I basically have had rollers almost my entire life, along with probably 20 or 30 different types of pigeons. As you grow up, kids on the block, they always had pigeons.
Okay. Oh, but rollers have always been a big part of it then.
Yep.
And what about the NBRC? How long have you been associated with that club?
Probably since the 80s, late 80s. I've always known of them, but I did my time in the service like everybody does. My brother kept my pigeons, and I almost wanted to strangle him when I got home. He had literally traded all of my Pinsum rollers to some guy that he met, and he liked his birds better than he liked mine. So it took it took the wind out of me when I got home and found out that all the old 514 blood was gone.
Oh no, so it wasn't a good trade.
No, he didn't know anything. Yeah.
So, I mean, you've had other breeds and stuff like that, but rollers have always been the thing with you. What was it specifically that really drew you to the rollers to keep them?
Mostly my dad, because he would, he worked for United Airlines, and if pigeons got shipped, sometimes he ended up with one or two that got pedigrees on them, things like that.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that too much, but back in the 60s, things had a way of getting hijacked.
Oh,
Anyway,
okay.
I would, plus the fact that I grew up in Gardena and Hawthorne, and back in the 60s, in particular, that was the hotbed of roller heaven because Bill Pinson lived down the street, a couple blocks away from me in Gardena. We moved out Bill died in 67 in June, and 68 in June. And we moved out to Simi Valley in 71. But before that, I was collecting pigeons since I was collecting Coke bottles, 5, 6, 7 years old. They had a Quonset hut up on Imperial in Vermont, the old Quonset hut, and Bill Pinson and all the other guys of his generation would take their birds down there and sell them on the week, once a month at a pigeon fair. You could buy rollers for 50 cents, $1, with the pedigree. You paid, I think, quarter for the pedigree, but so it's hard to actually put a finger on it. I've always had them. In junior high school, you start trading. Well, that's what it really is fun, because now somebody gets a name for a pigeon, and you got to have that blood, or you got to have that bird. And I had a particular bird named Lucy, who was a mix. I'm not a geneticist, but she was a weird looking bird. She did roll, but she was just odd colored. She was like a red bar on one side and a blue check on the other. Well, Lucy was the only bird that my mother would ever allow in the house because she was notorious for me trading her to somebody down a couple of blocks away. And I'd get what I wanted. And 2 or 3 months later, Lucy was back in my loft. She always came home, always.
So you had your father, that was a big part of it for you. Did you have any other mentors when you were flying throughout the years?
Um, People that were in the area, within let's say a bicycle's ride, as I became a junior high and stuff, I was gallivanting all over Southern California on a bicycle. I had an old green Stingray that took me everywhere, and I would call people up and ask if I could come over and visit and talk about birds. And there was people like Dick Stevens and Bill Patrick in particular, uh, others in the South Bay area, because that was the roller heaven. We call it the South Bay, Los Angeles. The NBRC basically with Pinson and uh, Ralph Hilton, they were the foundations of the NBRC and getting it off the ground in '61.
So did you get to go see like Dick Stevens lofts and stuff like that when you were younger?
Many, many, many times.
Oh, really? Oh, wow, cool. That's really cool. For people who don't know, can you explain the role of a band secretary for the NBRC and what that includes?
Yeah, I because of my pursuit of breeding records and pedigrees, and because that was the big thing back in the '60s for me. The more I learned about a pedigree, which was, the genealogy of your bird, the bloodline. Everybody was chasing bloodlines. Back then it was J. Leroy Smith or Perkins and Polona and, Pensum. You chase paper, kind of. But for me, in 2000, well, I've been collecting pedigrees since I was a child. And half these people, I had their pedigrees, but I really didn't know them just by name only. I never met them. And then in 2005, Bob Bergren, who was our old secretary of the NBRC, he called me up and we were talking about something. And as I got more involved with the pedigree side of it, I would start asking Bob, is there any way that you can send me information on pedigrees? And do you know anybody? And then he introduced me to, or reintroduced me to Dick Stevens, because I'd lost total touch with a lot of the guys. After you go 4 years in the Army, you don't think about that. You get out and get married and have kids. So yeah, I chased paper, and then I started coming across breeding records, meeting other old timers. As I met one, I would pick their brains and just ask them, do you know anybody else that's got old breeding records? And for me, I had a friend in 1984. He wrote a pigeon program for me. It's kind of an interesting story. He traveled around the world setting up major corporations' computers. And my first computer was what's called an A286. It's the same computer that was on the space shuttle to the moon, same model. That he wrote the program for that, a pigeon program that I could do a pedigree on it. Before that, everybody was handwriting. All their pedigrees was handwritten. And I started downloading and putting all my band records in their pedigrees. And then I started running across mistakes. And ever since then, I tell people, I didn't write the pedigree. They have to realize that these old timers were working 12-hour days, 7 days a week. They'd come home, and in some cases, they literally were doing pedigrees by candlelight. So it's a fascination for me is to get the old breeding records, put them in the computer, and I've been asking everybody that I know for the last 10 years if they knew how to upgrade my pigeon program to a DOS from a DOS DBase 3 program to some other platform like Windows. And I struck out for years and years and years. We had one company that wanted $10,000 in Switzerland to convert my database. I have since, in the last month, found a gentleman that has already started the process, and I have over 70,000 records in my computer, which is, Pinson's records, Smith, Bologna, Perkins, um, and some of it's just bits and pieces. I would love to get Bologna's records. I know the gentleman that has them, but he's reluctant to share them for whatever reason. And some people are like that. I know people that have other records that I've asked, and they said, "Yeah, I'll get you a copy of them." 2, 3 years later, I'm still asking. But I believe that when my program gets converted over to a Windows-based program, NBRC and I might have a talk, because I've always wanted to share that information. People used to send me pedigrees and ask me to verify them. And I would say, "No, this is a mistake." "Well, how do you know?" I said, "Because I'm looking at the breeding records." I don't make that judgment. It's the man that wrote the pedigree is the breeder. So, he's gone. I don't know how I can help you. You don't agree with it, then put whatever you want. I have a plan to hopefully someday take my database and put it in the Pigeon Museum.
Yeah, that's a great place to keep it right there.
They could charge $1 for a pedigree, and there would people be standing in line to verify what their bloodline goes back to. And that's what I enjoy doing. That people send me a pedigree and ask me, what is it, and how, if it goes back to anything that I have in the computer already, I can run it back to the 1800s.
Oh, so it goes back to the 1800s. Your pedigrees go that far back.
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. And what do you think the pedigree keeping is like today compared to back then? Do you think that the people are still really on top of it like the people back then were?
Some people in the roller hobby they're genuinely interested in their bloodline. Back in the 70s, we had a little bit of a problem in the roller hobby with uh, people that were breeding for big bucks. I mean, thousands of dollars for a pigeon, but they were show rollers.
Okay.
And that gets into a whole different subject. There are quite a few. I've been called a purist, and I don't mind that tag, if you want to call it that. I've kept Bill Pinson's birds as pure as when I had them as a youngster. Uh, I was 4 or 5 generations off of 514, the most famous hen that ever lived, and very proud of that fact. There's very few people that can say that they actually have purebred Pinson rollers or the bloodline.
I was just going to ask you about that. Like, do you think that there really is still pure Pensum birds out there?
There are, yes,
Yeah.
I know a handful.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about 514 and that hen and the background story with that bird and why it's so important?
Just the fact that it produced two youngsters that are very well known, particularly in the LA area. 119 and well, 119's bloodline, basically it was the hotter side of the two. They're half brothers. Uh, 119 was prone to rolling down though. The youngsters, they were so hot. The brother, and I can't even think of the band number right now, which is 156. 156 was a very late developing bird, but the 119 came in early and was prone to rolling down. So Bill used to sell those pigeons out of the 119 bloodline and make a few bucks. That's how, one way he supported his family. And the 156 blood, late developing, but the actual velocity of those pigeons, it's hard. Once you've seen it, you're tainted for life. And all of the purist friends that I have, we always talk about it. It's like once you've seen a true Birmingham roller spin, it takes your breath away. But that's the difference in the hobby today versus back, when I was a youngster, because when you went to somebody's house, all they said was, watch the red check, watch the blue bar. It was a particular bird that you watched. It wasn't, oh, did you see the full turn? No, the bird that you were asked to watch was a representation of what that man had in his backyard, what he was able to produce. And that was a little bit different than what we're doing today.
The bird itself, do you think the performance of the breed has changed from back then to where we're at today?
I do. I do.
In what way?
Um, the birds do not have the tight velocity, the 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 quality spin that there were back in the 60s or 50s.
Okay, so you actually think the quality has gone down then?
I do. And unfortunately, and this is something I'm sharing with you, and I don't know how many people are going to hear this, but I had the same conversation with Paul Bradford one time. I said, Paul, why don't you tell people what you really think? Because I know better. And he goes, for the very simple reason that if I did, they would not invite me to judge any shows anymore. And he says, and that's all I have is to be able to judge shows. Otherwise, I'm just a backyard flyer like nobody else. So and that kind of, I will always remember that. It's hard to criticize and critique something, but again, the hobby is subjective to your own whims. You're feeding the birds, you're producing them. If you're happy with them, it doesn't matter what other people think.
And so do you think that the way that they're judged has changed too from back then to today?
Um, Absolutely. We back in the '90s when they started developing the World Cup, the hobby did a complete turnaround, and everything was quarter turn, half turn, full turn. The velocity wasn't important. The depth wasn't important. As an example, Bill Patrick used to raise some of the deepest rolling pigeons I'd ever seen with quality. And those, I've had his bloodline for 30 years. I had birds that literally could roll for 8 to 10 seconds from pin dot, not switching wings, a straight downward velocity rolling pigeon, and pull out before they hit the ground. That is an incredible sight. Didn't happen that often, but Chan Grover, another great friend of mine, I called Chan up one time and I said, Chan, I got a big problem. And he goes, what's the problem? I said, you need a hard hat to walk in my backyard. And he goes, so what's the problem? I said, you need a hard hat to walk in my backyard. He goes, Gene, if you don't have roll downs, you don't have rollers. Another lesson learned. I really do think that the quality of the roller has declined because back then you only bred for a certified spinner. But again, that's my opinion only.
Oh, that's really interesting though. And even the way it changed in the way that judging and rules of the kits and everything else have changed as well over the years too.
They definitely have. World Cup started with a 10-foot minimum depth rule. Um, and if you haven't watched a lot of kits, and I assume that most of the judges have watched a lot, but every judge judges differently.
Say someone's that's coming into rollers and that they're new and they're coming up on some birds. How important would it be if they were to be getting some rollers from somebody to be asking about pedigrees and stuff like that? Would that be something that you'd recommend that they really push for?
I tell everybody that I talk to, especially the new guys, because they call me up asking for bands, and that's part of my job. I'm lost and found. The pigeon gets found, and they call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. Little old ladies in New York, come and get your pigeon, and I'm like, yes, ma'am. I'll just jump on the next plane. But I have to look up who the pigeon belongs to based on the information they give me.
If someone's coming into it then and they're getting birds, like how heavy would that be for them to really lean on getting a pedigree for those birds?
Well, so here's the issue that I have. If you're paying good money for something, I don't care if it's a pigeon, a dog, a cat, a horse, a pig. Generally, you're trying to get the best blood that you can acquire. So you're going to pay whatever that gentleman is willing to sell it to you for, if you think it's worth it. I asked a lot of people that called me up. They say, I'm brand new in the hobby, and they're all excited. And I said, and they'll throw a name out me and say, oh, yeah, I know his bloodline. And I asked him, did you get the pedigrees on the birds? And there's a silence. No. And I said, well, why did you spend that money? You could have went to the pet shop and bought the same thing. That's just the way I feel. If you're selling quality birds and you're getting a pretty penny for some of these pigeons, like Jackanet or something back in the '70s, they were getting some good money for their pigeons. It should at least give the youngster the pedigrees.
With different animals, good blood is good blood. So with dogs, right, they have the AKC. I mean, you guys are the NBRC, and you guys have this long history going back to the 1800s, right? And the pedigrees that you guys you've put the work in, you've done the bloodline, the trees, all that. So all of those pedigrees have kind of been processed, checked, verified, and they kind of check out, right? So who's to say that, so someone wants to buy some pigeons from another person, and this guy's going to charge them a bunch of money, and they just go onto a Word document and then make up a bunch of nonsense, charge them a bunch, and just kind of create this pedigree out of thin air and give it to them.
I've seen it.
Yeah, so that does happen.
Absolutely.
How does somebody kind of fish that out? So, I mean, you guys can track things down to a certain degree. Are people like submitting pedigrees to you with their own families to kind of keep it live and active?
Not recently, but my whole thing is I collect breeding records from before the 1990s, basically, because that includes Jackanet and all the Southern California guys that were chasing that bloodline. I don't have Jackanet's records, but I've got enough of the pedigrees from his birds that, you know, it's in the computer. I'm more interested in the foundational birds that came over in 1935 and 36 to Buckley and Teasdale and Father Slatterman and people like that. Uh, and I've just, like I said, I've been very lucky that I've known some of these old timers and they've given me their breeding records. So I have a cross reference between Pinson and Smith, a lot of Polona records. And they all tie together because they all go back to Bill Pinson at some point in time for the most part. And Bill got his birds from, a number of different breeders in England.
So the big families that are still actively here that you're aware of, you can kind of just request those breeding records later on down the road from them and kind of keep track on it that way then.
Yes.
And that's how you're getting the new information.
Yeah. I just got Doc Smiley's records. He just sent them to me. I got a package here that, you know, I did Frank Lavin, a Hall of Famer. And Frank and I used to go down and visit him every other year for probably 20 years in Texas. I love taking him and his wife Artie. We'd go out to breakfast, and that was a big treat for her. But I got Frank's records, and when he passed, it was kind of a strange thing because I talked to him about 2 weeks before he passed away. And there was another gentleman there that was visiting at the time, and we were kind of, the three of us were talking, and I said, Frank, you're a Hall of Famer. I'd really like to put your records in because this is for the NBRC. It's information that's available to any of the members. And he kind of said, well, I hope I can find it all. Well, and then he passed 2 weeks later. I did get several boxes of his breeding records going back to when he started in 72. Some of it earlier than that, but for the most part. And there was years where he bred 400 pigeons. And I was like, holy smokes. As much as I go down and visit Frank, I never knew that he was breeding that many birds. I mean, I'd breed 100, 150, and that was a lot of pigeons. Even somebody like Bill Pinson did not breed more than 100, 150, sometimes 200 birds.
That's
But
what he would do a year.
yes, and you figure him above all others, the demand for his stock was astronomical. I mean, he was breeding pigeons for people. They would specifically say, I want this bloodline. And he put his pairs together knowing that, he could sell them for $10, $15. Back in the 60s, he would, some of the birds may have gone for a little bit more than that, but that was, you sell four birds to $100. That was your rent payment for the month.
Yeah. So any member of the NBRC can make a request for some specific breeding records and have a copy of them sent out.
Yeah, I just print them off the computer and send them. I usually like to know, if they've got. I like to share. So if they'll send me some of old pedigrees, it doesn't really matter if they're from the 30s and 40s, 50s. I'd love to get a copy of them. I don't need the originals.
Just the information. That probably is hard because I'm sure to a lot of people, especially the ones that you really want, a lot of people probably look at these as part of their collection, right? Like this is,
It is. Yeah, it is. And it's Some people don't mind sharing, but for the most part, the NBRC members that have been doing this for a while, they know I'm the band secretary, so they have to send me their money to get their bands every year. They know I have the largest collection of breeding records in the world on Birmingham rollers. So sometimes that does give me an in where I can call and say, hey, I heard you got so and so's records, and is it possible to get a copy of them? Sometimes I get lucky and sometimes I don't.
Yeah,
And most of the time, as you're well aware of, when somebody passes in our hobby, 9 times out of 10, their family is dumping that stuff in the trash can just as fast as they can sell the house. And
yeah,
that's a sad part about it because there is no recovering that information. It's lost forever. It's kind of one of the reasons why I started doing this.
yeah. Preserve it. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. If it was important to that person to write it all down, it really is. It's a shame the way some of it, yeah, just gets, like you said, just dumped in the trash sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine is in my will and trust, and it'll all go to the NBRC when I go. You can see behind me there's a lot of that's only one, and I've got like 5 of those.
All
But
those
they
all
all
those
fit in
filing
binder.
books, those binders, yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. Why do you think, I mean, because there's all the different breeds of pigeons, all the different ways that you can compete, with performing pigeons, high flyers, the Thonics, I mean, all the different, why do you think Birmingham rollers have just always been up there at the top, sustaining through all the years as a really popular part of the hobby?
They have two things going for them. One is the performance side. As a kid, you were looking up in the sky, looking at these pigeons and watching them flip. Well, if they were youngsters, that's all they did. They didn't roll, they didn't spin, they flipped. And for a young kid, that was pretty cool. I mean, we like to do flips on the ground and acrobatics and whatever. To watch a pigeon do it, it's like, oh, that pigeon's crazy. The second thing is they have a mentality that's kind of unusual, I'd say, for pigeons, other than the actual racing homer. Pinson's bloodline in particular had something unique that I have not been able to put my finger on it, but it had a homing ability that was superior to a lot of the other bloodlines that were out there. They could get chased up by a hawk, go up to pin dot, fly all night, and be on your roof in the morning.
Interesting.
That was, they also had a temperament that built over the years and years of breeding. He bred a certain temperament into his pigeons. They weren't necessarily flighty, they weren't feisty, um, not docile either. They would stand their position. If you wanted to put your hand in the loft, some of them would, bang you with their wing, get away from me, cock in particular, but I think they just had a superior temperament.
What do you think the future of the hobby looks like going forward?
Oh, the NBRC or the roller hobby in general. Some people get to the point where they don't want to compete. And that's one thing that's always going to be out there is there are just as many backyard people with pigeons as there are actual uh, flyers. I know a lot of backyard guys.
Mhm.
They don't necessarily want to compete. They just want to have fun. And they're happy just flying their birds for their own enjoyment versus putting up with the politics and, stuff like that.
So if anybody is interested, wanting to get involved with the Birmingham Rollers and wanting to compete, what's their first step on getting started?
Go to some reputable person to buy your birds. I don't recommend you buy them, well, especially you're not going to buy them at the pet shop because they're not going to produce. There's a reason why they're in the pet shop. But yeah, go to somebody reputable. If you're lucky enough and they have time, I hope they mentor you and give them a year. That's what part of the hobby is just sharing your knowledge with the next generation. I enjoy the heck out of that.
Solid advice right there. All right, well, we're coming up against the clock, but Gene, this has been really interesting taking this deep dive into the history here. I really appreciate all your time and thoughts on this. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Well, I hope I do better next time because I enjoyed this.
Yeah, this has been really great. Thank you. This episode of the All About Pigeons podcast is brought to you by the National Birmingham Roller Club. The NBRC is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting the flying and breeding of the Birmingham roller pigeons, a unique performance breed known for its acrobatic rolling flight. The club brings together fanciers from across the United States and around the world to share knowledge, grow the hobby, and celebrate these amazing birds. Each year, the NBRC hosts regional and national flying competitions, including the National Championship Fly, where members compete to showcase their best performing kit of rollers. Whether you're already raising Birmingham rollers or just fascinated by their aerial skills, the NBRC offers membership, bulletins, community, and resources to help you connect and learn more. Visit nbrc.us to join or find out how to get involved. Thank you for listening to another ad-free, listener-requested episode of the All About Pigeons podcast. If you like the show and want to help me keep it going, as well as supporting your other pigeon promotional work, head to the website PigeonPod, that's pigeonpod.com. You can make a donation there. If you can't make a donation today, support the show by giving us a good 5-star review wherever you're listening to us at right now. That really helps the podcast and helps the algorithm get us out there to other people who might not know about Pigeon Podcast. If you have any episode requests, upcoming pigeon shows, competition results, or you want to be a guest on the show and just talk about some pigeons, or you have a shout out for a friend, shoot us an email at staff@pigeonpod.com. Thanks again for listening. We really appreciate your support. And remember, together the hobby thrives. Support each other and enjoy your pigeons.